This pack weighs over 60 pounds and I'm gonna try and carry it through the Rocky Mountains over the course of 3 days of backpacking. This is probably gonna beat my body up and there's no guarantee that I'll even be able to finish the trip, so why am I doing it? This heavy of a pack isn't out of the question for a lot of backpackers out there. The combination of affordable gear, which is often heavy, and packing for every worst case scenario can easily result in a 50 or 60 pound pack. On this trip, I'm gonna share with you guys the ridiculous gear that I know people are bringing backpacking, but should definitely leave at home, like an entire jar of peanut butter. What? The gear that I kind of realize is nice to have, and then the essential gear that is absolutely necessary in order to survive in the remote wilderness. Let's play a game. How about you guys in the comments guess what the most ridiculous piece of gear that I brought on this trip is. I'm doing this trip solo, so I won't be able to offload any gear if I'm finding the pack too heavy, and I'm gonna have to deal with any injuries or mishaps on my own. I'm hiking a popular route that starts at Lake Louise in Banff National Park, heads south over some beautiful but high mountain passes, and then ends at the Johnston Canyon waterfalls. I'm about 7 kilometers in on the day, which is a little over halfway. And the pack is definitely feeling heavy. It's advertised kind of as being able to carry up to 100 pounds. And while it's carrying 60 pounds comfortably, my body definitely wouldn't be able to handle 100 pounds. I'm struggling a little bit. It's not too bad when the trail's flat or slightly downhill, but anytime I hit an uphill, it's a struggle. Well, today's not too bad with a gradual uphill throughout the day with a couple of steeper sections. Tomorrow is gonna be tough with a really steep uphill in order to gain the major pass of the day, Pulsatilla Pass. There's a little bit of a personal element behind testing whether I can carry this much weight comfortably. And it has to do with the fact that Steph and I are gonna be having our baby girl this August, and I wanna be able to go out on backpacking trips with them. And in order to do that, I'm probably gonna have to be carrying 60 plus pounds of diapers and everything else, all that goes with bringing a baby backpacking. And if I can't carry that weight, then we might not be able to do that. I dropped the pack, taking a little break, hydrating because I'm sweating a lot carrying that pack up these hills. But this is a beautiful lake to hang out in and contemplate why people end up with 50, 60 pound packs. Because I know there's people watching right now who are in that boat. And let me know how accurate I am with these 3 assumptions. Number 1, comfort. You just want to be comfortable when you're backpacking, so you're bringing everything in the kitchen sink. For example, on this trip, I have a big chair, a table, my sleep system is pretty darn comfortable, and that adds weight. How people get up to 50, 60 pounds by just adding comfort items to their pack, I'm not sure, but maybe it also has something to do with this second item, and that's the fact that I think a lot of people pack their fears. For example, on this trip, I brought micro spikes just because I didn't know how much snow was going to be up at elevation and I wanted to have them just in case. I've also seen it a lot with my friends where they bring just in case clothing, so extra sweaters, extra socks, that kind of thing. And they'll even bring extra pairs of underwear and socks so that they have a pair for every single day of the trip. Unless you're weighing every piece of gear that's going into your pack, which I recommend, and putting it into some sort of gearless tool like packwizard.com, then you could very easily end up with a super heavy pack without even knowing it. The third reason is that maybe it's the way people learned how to backpack, or it's just the way they've always done things. When they were learning, someone said you just always have to bring a heavy hatchet with you when you're going backpacking, so that's what they put in their pack now. It's really easy to just stick with what you know, but I think you'll see on this trip that doing that and carrying a heavy pack is not necessarily a recipe for the most fun on a backpacking trip. I'm about 2/3 of the way to my first camp of the trip. I'm gonna go around this lake, drop a little bit of elevation, go around a second lake, and then my campsite's gonna be at the end of that second lake. terrifying up here. We're getting close, almost there, and not a minute too soon. My body is slowly breaking down on me. I got my shelter set up, my sleep system. That combined with a cook system and a way to treat water are pretty much the core items that you need if you want to survive in the remote wilderness. What aren't core survival items are the tasty treats that I brought, like some Pringles, some fudge-covered Oreos, even a tasty beverage to have at the end of each day. Out of all the things that I've packed in order to increase the weight of my pack, I think Tasty Treats are probably the one that I'm not going to regret at all. The two tasty beverages are non-alcoholic beers from the sponsor of today's video, Athletic Brewing. This one's a little warm, so I'm going to use my secret way in order to get beers cold in the backcountry. As I do that, I want to issue you the same challenge that got me hooked on Athletic's non-alcoholic beers. It's called the 6-pack challenge, and it's pretty simple. Pick up a 6-pack of Athletic Brew, then stick them in the fridge and see how long they last. My favorites right now are their All Out Extra Dark and their Run Wild IPA. For me, between after work bevies with Steffi, a brew while barbecuing, and mixing a couple of athletics in while hanging out with friends on the weekend, the 6-pack was gone in days. I found myself reaching for them more than other options because I didn't have to worry if I had to do some work in the evening or if I wanted to squeeze in a workout or about being hungover the next day. Check out Athletic Brewing at the link in the description. I had to kind of twist their arm to convince them that my audience would like non-alcoholic beers. So definitely go pick up a 6-pack if you want to support the channel, and then let me know what style you got and how you did with the 6-pack challenge. I also found some snow in order to get my Athletic Brew a little bit colder. It was pretty cold after the river, but now it's gonna get ice cold. My cook system on this trip is pretty ridiculous. I brought a gigantic fuel can, definitely not necessary for a 3-day trip. Probably not even necessary for like a 10-15 day trip, but I see people bringing fuel cans like this on short trips all the time, and it's one of those ridiculous things. Something that I did that I see a lot of people doing that adds weight as well is packing a lot of food. I have so many snacks, so much food. I even brought an extra freeze-dried meal dinner. I've heard of people doing this just in case they get stuck on trail an extra day, but the odds of you getting stuck on trail are very low. And if you do, you're not gonna starve to death after a day or two of not having dinner. Your snacks that are left over, guaranteed you're gonna have leftover snacks, are gonna get you through the rest of the trip. Another item that I've seen people bring as kind of a backup, and I'm not joking about this, I've seen people bring an entire jar of peanut butter, 10,000 calories, as a backup on backpacking trips because they had food anxiety. This is a kilogram of weight that is definitely not needed in my pack right now. That hits the spot at the end of a big hard day. The mosquitoes were pretty bad where I was, even with the wind, so I went and got my Flextail Tiny Repel. This thing has worked really well for me in the past in order to repel the mosquitoes, and I don't have to slather bug goop all over myself, and then it doesn't feel good when you're lathering yourself up in bug goop or sunscreen, really. That's why I wear long pants, long shirt, just to protect myself from the sun without having to put a ton of sunscreen on everywhere. Gooey. I brought 2 carabiners on this trip, one in order to attach my Crocs to my pack. Then the second one was I might just need a carabiner sometime. I know people think this way. I see just random carabiners clipped onto packs all the time, but on this trip it actually came in handy. I needed it in order to send my bear bag up the bear pole there, because not all of the bear hang ropes have clips on them, so the carabiner came in handy. People swear by gravity filters, but this system weighs about 3 times as much as what I usually use. But what's nice about it is this bag, it's a Platypus quick draw system, is able to fill up the 2 water bottles that I brought, which are both 1.5 liters. I brought one lightweight smart water bottle that I picked up at the gas station, and then a Nalgene with the 1 bottle system. So you saw the tube that was going over my shoulder from my pack that I was drinking out of, that's what this is. So I can just attach the 1 bottle system to the lid here and then drink out of a tube. And once I get to camp, I have a standard water bottle that I can use anywhere. For the quick draw system, it has a different top to it than the standard quick draw, and this allows you to attach a hose onto it, which then attaches to the bag, and then the hose can just go into any other water bottles and filter water. What people like about this system is that you can kind of just set it and forget it. It's just gonna filter the water without you having to squeeze anything or do any work at all really. With the system that I have, you just have to make sure that you catch it before it overflows the bottle, but that's easy to do on the first bottle. And then the second bottle I don't need to worry because I have the exact amount in the dirty bag here. What I've seen a lot of people do, which has been recommended to me, is you get a second bag and then you just drain from the dirty bag into the clean bag, and then you have that clean bag available for anyone to just take water as needed. I've only used a gravity system a couple times before and didn't really like them, and I was kind of expecting that to be the same thing with this one, but that went pretty smoothly. And by having the exact amount of capacity in the dirty bag as the 2 bottles I need to fill up, made it really easy and quick. So as much as when I'm in a rush, I really like the standard quick draw system, I'm gonna admit that the gravity system is pretty cool. My big 3, which consists of the tent, the pack, and my sleep system, weighs a combined 20 pounds. And that's because I'm using essentially a 4-person tent here, which weighs 4 or 5 pounds. The pack is a whopping 8 pounds, but that's because it's very robust. And then my sleep system in here consists of a pretty cool little system. For the sleeping pad, I'm using a Big Agnes Boundary Deluxe, but what makes this unique, outside of the fact that it's a very comfortable sleeping pad that I've tried before, is the fact that this one is 30 inches wide. I've never used a pad this wide on a backpacking trip, and I'm really curious to see how it affects my sleep. For the pillow, I have the super heavy Exped Mega Pillow, which is very comfy, but really big and heavy. And then I'm using a quilt from Featherstone that you guys have recommended to me. Pretty light, but not the lightest on the market. Today definitely kicked my butt a little bit with the 60-pound pack. Tomorrow will be a little bit lighter with the few pounds of food that I ate, but still not light enough to not have me worried about the distance and elevation tomorrow. In order to get up to the pass tomorrow, it's going to be about 700 meters of elevation gain, and then the mileage for the entire day is about 25 kilometers, which today at 15 kilometers was tough. 25 kilometers is going to be really tough, and I'm probably going to have to take lots of breaks. As far as the over-under on the number of breaks, I'm going to guess 4. But I may need to take like 5 or 6 in order to not get injured. The challenging day tomorrow will give me a lot of time to really think about all the gear that I probably should have left at home and not brought on this trip. I already talked about a couple of the items like the peanut butter as well as the extra freeze-dried meal, but there's so much more. I'm gonna enjoy this evening and do some reading on another unnecessary item, my Kindle. I usually just read on my phone, but I know a lot of people bring Kindles, and I guess I kind of get it, but it's a lot of weight and bulk when you can just use your phone and it works just fine. Good night, we'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning. I slept pretty good. The 30-inch wide pad was super roomy, probably a little bit more pad than I need. I think I can get away with 25-inch wide pads, no problem, but overall, really comfortable. The large tent really came in handy because there's a porcupine creeping around last night, chewing on anything that was outside the tent. So I had to bring everything, including my giant pack, inside the tent. So I'm using up the space pretty good. I don't think the porcupine chewed up anything essential. I'll have to check the pack in a little bit more detail later, but it did get a hold of one of my trekking poles, and it's a mess. I am starving this morning, so glad to have some breakfast. I definitely didn't eat enough yesterday. Between the heat and then working really hard carrying that pack, I just didn't have a huge appetite, so I'm gonna have to do better today about consuming calories kind of throughout the day continuously. I packed everything up, ready to go. There's only one thing left to do this morning, and luckily I have a lot of toilet paper in order to do it. This is actually a huge luxury for me. Normally I'm allocating myself toilet paper. I usually do about 4 squares per wipe and then 3 wipes per day. So if I run into some sort of issue, then I'm pooched, and this is gonna really be a nice little peace of mind. That definitely dropped some weight, and while a full roll of toilet paper might seem kind of crazy, I know a lot of people who do it because they get poop anxiety when they're on the trail. And as far as all the things that you can bring in order to kind of alleviate fears, a couple 100 grams for a whole roll of toilet paper isn't the worst thing in the world. Back on the dusty road, and I'm excited for today because it's a beautiful morning and I know I'm gonna get some epic views today. The one thing that I'm not super excited about is what I mentioned yesterday, where I have a ton of elevation gain today and a lot of miles to cover, but I have a lot of time. Even if it takes me like 10 hours to get there and I have to take a lot of breaks, then that's okay. I'm starting the day by heading down into that valley, losing some elevation kind of consistently until I get to that one spot where I then need to start gaining elevation pretty aggressively in order to make it up the pass. Something that I'm gonna be keeping an eye on pretty aggressively today is injuries and how my body is feeling. I don't wanna push anything too much and then end up getting injured, which is a lot easier to do with a heavy pack like this. So if I do need frequent breaks, I'm gonna take them, let my body recover. even if it ends up with a really long day in the long run. I hit one of the many creek crossings that I'm probably gonna encounter on this trip, and because I'm in such a remote area, there's no bridges pretty much. So I'm either gonna have to rock hop or just walk straight through the water. And my footwear is gonna be an interesting part of this equation. On my last heavy pack trip, I wore trail runners and I got a lot of flack in the comments for not wearing big hiking boots. So on this trip, I wore hiking boots. They're waterproof, they're up like 6 inches, 8 inches maybe. So on this kind of crossing, it's either gonna be awesome or terrible, because if the water is higher than the top of my boot, then I'm gonna get my boots soaking wet, and it's probably not gonna dry at all today because they're made with Gore-Tex, and Gore-Tex just does not dry. Where if I had trail runners, I'd 100% be getting wet, but they dry out really quickly. The other option, which I might take if I encounter deeper creeks, is to bust out the Crocs, but I really rather not do that. It takes so much time taking off my boots, taking off my socks, walking through the water, and then putting it all back on again. So I think I can get through going that rock, that rock, that rock, that rock, and then straight sailing without getting my feet too wet. Okay, let's see how this goes. Maybe here. Yeah, okay, that's okay. That's okay. All right. Still no soaker. All right. Woo. Woo, that wasn't too bad. Waterproof boots get 1 point on that creek crossing. I think the trail's straight through there. Looks like I'm just gonna have to walk through it. Hope my boots don't get topped out. Boots were definitely a good choice. It's very rare that I would say that, but on this trip, waterproof boots are coming in clutch. The trail's just completely washed out. Hey, Bert. Hey, oh. Hey, Bert. Let's do a little check-in as I take my first break of the day. Gone decent amount of miles, 6.5 kilometers. So I'm about a quarter of the way done the day, which is kind of crazy to me because my body's feeling it. My legs feel pretty good, which makes sense. I've been doing a lot of weight training, a lot of running, and it's paying off. Where I'm uncomfortable is where the pack is sitting on my body. It's really hot out, I'm sweating a ton, and I'm getting chafage around my shoulders, and then my hips are getting really sore from carrying all the weight on them. I'm gonna take a pretty good break here, hydrate, eat some food, because after this is when I start gaining all that elevation to hit the pass. A little trick that I'm using on this uphill is that I know where the water sources are and I know what the elevation gain is like, so I brought just enough water to get me to the other side of this pass, because if both my water bottles are full, that's 7 pounds of water weight. So just having one full saves me quite a bit of weight to have to lug up the elevation. Just making my way through the bottom of this avalanche path. That's why there's so much snow left here. It was probably like 20-25 feet deep right after it avalanched. That's why all these trees are kind of in shambles as well. Taking a little short break here before tackling the final elevation gain before hitting probably one of my favorite passes in all of the Canadian Rockies. So excited to get up there, but just need this little pick me up right now. Let's do a little body check in. I'm definitely getting beaten up. My glutes are on fire from just like pushing my body and the pack up the hills. So it'll be nice to hit some slight downhill sections after the pass. And then I thought I tweaked my Achilles tendon doing a big step up, but it's kind of settled out a little bit and I should be okay. Right now I'm just looking at that pass wanting to get up there and check out the views, because if you think the views from here are good, once you're up on the pass, they're phenomenal. Made it up onto the pass. Like I said, one of my favorite passes in the Rockies. Beautiful views that way. Beautiful views that way. I'm excited to be going downhill for a little while. It'll be a nice break on my legs. My glutes and everything are on fire. It's nice to be over the pass and heading downhill. I kept getting reminded of that jar of peanut butter in my pack every time I took a big step up. I named the jar Nutty, and every time I took one of those steps, I said, F you, Nutty. And it helped. It got me through a pretty tough part of the day. A backup jar of peanut butter is definitely something that no one needs to be bringing on any backpacking trips. Once we get to camp, I'll share with you guys a bunch of other gear that I have in my pack that I think is pretty ridiculous, and for most people out there on most trips, you don't need to be bringing it with you. I'm gonna be kind of laying down the law saying, leave these items at home. It's a pretty cruisy slight downhill all the way to camp, so I'm excited to just kind of book it there. The campsite tonight is at a lake that I think is pretty beautiful. I'm excited to maybe go for a swim because it is boiling hot out. I'm 18 kilometers in, starting to fall apart. Each step is getting tougher and tougher. Well, I've taken inventory once I get to camp because I think right now I'm running a little bit on adrenaline, and once I take the pack off and kind of stop moving, I might be finding some sore spots. We're on the last stretch before getting to the campsite. It's all uphill and kicking my butt. Starting to think this was a bit of a stupid video idea. All the gear is ridiculous. Get rid of all of it. So it's official. 60 pounds over 25 kilometers in the mountains is too much, at least for me. I tested it out for you guys. If you're as fit as I am, then that's gonna beat up your body quite a bit. Spending 10 hours on trail really gave me a lot of time to reflect on the gear that I brought though. There's definitely some gear that's been surprising me on this trip, gear that I thought I'd think is ridiculous or kind of useless on a solo trip, but that is working out really well. Then there's also some gear that's a little bit ridiculous, and part of that's due to the conditions that I'm going out in. I'm in an area where you're not allowed fires, so bringing a hatchet was kind of silly. Yeah, ridiculous item. In line with the tools, I also brought a Leatherman multi-tool. This isn't quite as ridiculous as the hatchet because I have used one in the past to fix a tent when someone's tent pole broke, so they're useful but quite heavy for the amount of use that you get out of them and how often you'll probably use them on trail. A good system to follow if you are looking to cut weight from your pack is to take a look at your pack after every trip, and then if there's something that you haven't used over the course of like 3, 4, or 5 trips, then maybe it's time to cut it. Another category of items that is kind of ridiculous that I brought with me is gear that is heavier than it needs to be, especially for the cost. So I brought this big hefty flashlight. It wasn't expensive, but there's much lighter options out there for the same price or cheaper. You can get a headlamp on Amazon for like 20 bucks. That's gonna be about the 10th of the weight of this. Kind of in line with that, for me, my sleeping pad is a bit overkill. I don't really need a 30-inch wide sleeping pad, and it gets heavy. That pad is 2.5 pounds, which is a lot more sleeping pad than I need. For some people out there, they might want a 30-inch wide sleeping pad that's super comfortable, and then the Big Agnes Boundary Deluxe is one of the few options that does come in that width. Outside of the other items I've already talked about, like Mr. Nutty, the peanut butter jar, the giant fuel can, too much toilet paper, the only other kind of thing that is a little bit ridiculous to bring is duplicates of things. For instance, I have my giant tent behind me and then a tarp. The conditions for this trip were forecast to be sunny, so I didn't need a dual shelter system like this, especially when my tent is so big. I can hunker down in there, hang out, and it's gonna be no problem. Where I think a tarp is useful is if I'm bringing a much smaller tent that isn't as fun to hang out in, or if I'm in a group and the forecast is calling for rain, having a tarp hang out in makes a big difference. Tomorrow morning, I'll go over those items that surprised me. As a little teaser, the Flextail Tiny Rappel surprised me. It's heavy, but it's doing a great job at keeping the mosquitoes away. There's a lot of mosquitoes at this campsite especially, and I think I'd be going a little bit crazy without it. In the meantime, I'm gonna finish getting camp set up and then go eat a ton of food because I burnt a lot of calories today and I'm starving still, even though I did do a pretty good job of eating food consistently throughout the day. I ate all the food that I allocated for myself, but time to finish off those Pringles, have some more Sour Patch Kids, and my yummy dinner. I might even have my backup dinner tonight. I'm that hungry. This is a really nice lake. I probably won't go swimming just because of how buggy it is. I have to stay right next to the Flextail here. And I keep looking inside my bag and seeing Mr. Nutty. I need to put him at the bottom of the pack or something like that so I don't see him. Worst thing ever. Oh, but best surprise ever. I forgot that I had another Athletic brew in here. I'm gonna stick this in the lake right here, let it cool off, and then I'll be able to have it with my dinner. This is the All Out Extra Dark that I was telling you guys about. It's so tasty. You don't really even need to chill it off that much. As long as it's room temperature, it's still really good. This is probably my last Bushka's Kitchen meal ever. They went out of business, so they're not being made anymore. And it's the last one that I have. It's sad. There's a lot of companies in the outdoor space that have been going out of business recently. Some that I love, like Bushka's Kitchen. So I'm gonna really enjoy this one. Think about them. Enjoy my brew, and we'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning. I slept great last night, which is what I needed after working so hard yesterday. And now I'm treated with this spectacular view here. I got my entire camp set up. That's normally what I like to do in the morning, is wake up, pack up everything, and then go to the breakfast eating area and then eat breakfast before having number 2 and hitting the trail. I find that's usually the most efficient way to get on trail quickly. I promised I'd talk about gear that kind of surprised me on this trip, and I'll start off with the gravity system. I have it set up right here. It filled up a bottle. I didn't even have to be near it in order for it to do it. It was a very easy system and worked a lot quicker than I expected. I guess I underestimated how much adding a tube to the filter and just like letting the water kind of pull itself out makes for a quick system. I do think I like squeeze filters just a little bit better. I can see why people like the gravity filters, but they're just not really for me, but I can now see the appeal. What I like about this quick draw system is that you can use it as a gravity filter when you're at camp, but then when you're on trail, you can just remove the hose and use it as a squeeze filter, so you're not having to set up a whole gravity system every time you want to filter water when you're hiking. I was also pleasantly surprised by how much food I brought. I thought I was gonna have brought way more food than I needed. Other than Mr. Nutty and the extra meal, I finished off everything that's in here. I still have a couple snacks for hiking out, but I ate a lot of food. That was probably 5,000, 6,000 calories a day that I had packed, and I ate all of it. I still probably ran in a calorie deficit, which is normally what I do on backpacking trips, but normally I'm doing that calorie deficit while bringing 3,000 or 3,500 calories. The Jetboil is definitely not a surprise. I still hate them. The hiking boots surprised me a little bit as well. Normally I wear trail runners when I'm backpacking, but the hiking boots were perfect on this trip because there's a lot of spots where it was a little bit wet or the water was just deep enough for the hiking boots to protect me, and I kept my feet dry the entire time. I think in that regard, I just kind of got lucky. A lot of the time I would be having to wade through streams, my feet would be getting wet regardless, and the hiking boots, if they did get wet, they would not be drying out for the entire trip. Kind of in line with the hiking boots, not necessarily a surprise, but a nice to have on this specific trip was the tent. Being able to have a giant tent that I was able to bring all my gear in so that the porcupines weren't eating things was a nice little bonus, because otherwise I would have been having to hang my pack on the bear hangs, and that's just a pain in the butt. So I mentioned that the porcupines got a hold of one of my trekking poles. This is what it looks like. Super chewed up, still usable, which is good, but definitely chewed up. Some of you on this trip might have been wondering why you only saw one trekking pole in all of my shots, and you're like, you're crazy, only one trekking pole with a 60-pound pack. Well, let me assure you, I am using 2 trekking poles. One of them is just used as kind of my tripod. I put my camera on top of it, then stick it in the ground, and I'm able to do those awesome walk-by shots that you guys love and things like that. When I got to camp yesterday, I was not in a good state. I was a little delirious, very hungry, very tired. And if you're going backpacking with other people, that's not the kind of condition that you want to be arriving to camp in. You want to be able to enjoy camp, hang out with family, friends, and have a good time. So unless I join the military or become a hunter, I'll probably be sticking to lighter weight packs, especially when I'm going on solo trips, and then stick to the 60+ pounds when I am going with my family, or there's some sort of other circumstance that requires me to carry this much weight, because I'm not gonna do it by choice anymore. If you guys are waiting for that 70-pound pack video, probably not gonna happen. And that's information that I wanted to get out of this trip, that personal kind of test to see whether I could carry a pack this heavy in order to take my family backpacking. And I think it was a success, other than yesterday, where I definitely hit my limit, 25 kilometers through the mountains, uphill, downhill. I was beat. Like I said, if you want to support the channel, check out the link in the video description to Athletic Brewing, and maybe pick up a 6-pack and do the 6-pack challenge and let me know how it goes. If you want to see a video where I go on a trip on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I go with a base weight of 6 pounds. My total pack weight is just over 10 pounds. Then check out this video right up here. Also some really cool gear that's more top of the line as far as ultralight goes, but definitely gives you an idea of how minimal you can get on a backpacking trip.